George Kilpatrick, inspiration for the nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Boy, we got the dean of Syracuse radio up in here. Butch Charles, professor at SUNY Morrisville. But the voice, man, first of all, you cannot say Syracuse radio without saying the name of Butch Charles. So Butch, welcome. Butch, I wanted to get your perspective on the passing of DMX and the impact that he's had on the world of music, and on the world of hip hop in particular, as a DJ, as a former station owner, as a program director, and now professor at SUNY Morrisville. Holla at me. And in fact, even when I started, I said up in here as an homage to DMX. What's your take on his influence on the culture, the music? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that DMX certainly had a gigantic impact on hip hop music and where rap was going at that particular time, just because the sound of his voice sort of was synonymous with rugged, street, underground hip hop music that was not getting that type of airplay, was not getting that type of attention until he came out. I mean, there was Ja Rule, and Ja Rule's voice was similar.
Very similar.
And the attack was there, and Ja Rule's from my neighborhood. But that's Hollis.
What neighborhood is that?
That would be Hollis.
Hollis,
St.
Queens,
Albans.
New York City, yeah.
Home of Russell Simmons, Run DMC, LL Cool J right next door, etc. But
and 50 Cent running around up in there, right?
Well, yeah, later on, 50 Cent. But DMX was Yonkers, Bronx, Uptown. His mixtapes were hard when they were out, and then once he got that shot to get his music on, and Def Jam picked him up and started playing it. It caught on, without a problem on urban radio, but once it cracked that Billboard chart and wound up #1 there, and began to get play on the 93 Qs and Z89, not Z89s, but Z100s and mainstream pop stations, it was over. He was he was there and up and did real well and kept it going for 2, 3, maybe 5 straight, number one albums coming out. So there's no mistaking that at the beginning of this millennium, he laid groundwork for hip hop to branch out a little bit more, and a little bit more acceptance of more what would be considered underground rappers, who before that time really had a hard time breaking through and getting airplay. Right around that era, late 90s, 2000, for me, my head was in smooth jazz. Back in that time, I had sort of left the urban hip hop scene in terms of paying attention to it.
You were trying to own a station back then.
Well, I was trying to own a station. I was trying to be CD 101.9 and play smooth jazz and get an older audience and whatnot. So I wasn't there for the groundswell. I was listening to it here and there and trying to keep up with it, but wasn't paying close attention to it that you would when you were a programmer. But once we started Power, and then the hip hop and R&B had to become front and center, and then I was exposed to research and what the numbers say in terms of asking people, what songs you like, and and how being able to be part of that Clear Channel family and find out exactly how they were gauging music and playing it, and hearing other programmers in other cities talk about how music is judged for their audience and what they're playing. It opened my eyes up, and uh, to see the acceptance of DMX across the board, not just folks, but white folks and the those young kids and all of that, was just it was just amazing. And his music was bumping, his lyrics were real. You could tell they were real based on how he was doing it. He had a connection with God. And
he really did, right?
A spiritual connection, and was working that in. And I remember I sort of cringed in the early days when he did that. I just thought it, without knowing him as well as I needed to, just at first, very first, I thought it might have been a little gratuitous, and then paying attention to the lyrics and knowing where he had come from and the perspective from where he was coming from, I was, I got more into it, and began to feel him a little bit more, and and it was good. But that mix by itself was was great, and intoxicating. And then you had the Rough Riders. That whole Rough Riders crew were doing well. Jada Kiss had records out that were doing well. Eve had solo efforts, that were out doing well. The Locks, Money, Power, and Respect, that was all out and doing well.
Didn't Swiss Beats do some stuff with him, or did he come out of that too?
Well, Swiss Beats was the producer, started to produce him and get him going over there at Def Jam. So, I was into it. So, the perfect storm of things happened to shoot him up, at that time. And unfortunately, with that comes the drug abuse and addiction, and
couldn't shake it.
Couldn't shake it.
Didn't want to. I was watching that episode with Iyanla where he talked about, where the son said the condition for me getting a relationship with you is you going sober, and he was like, "I'm not putting no conditions on that.
Right.
That's me to decide whether I'm going to do that or not."
Yeah. And if what if you can what if all days, all the time, if that had not consumed him as it did, would he have longevity? Everybody likes to talk about longevity. Jay-Z has longevity, been able to carry his music across a couple of decades, 3 decades almost, and and still produce. Would he have had that had it not been for the setbacks? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I tend to think not. I tend to think just as Ja Rule fell off, after a while.
50 kind of killed him though, right? I mean,
well, maybe, I don't. I mean, 50 had good music too, and great beats, and
he started beefs with him.
Yeah, the beefs, but that only helps to promote music most of the time, rather than knock it. It depends on what you're coming out with, and I think, I think, uh, I think he just fell off in terms of popularity at the time. And then, of course, if you are getting beef with somebody and their music is hot and yours isn't at the moment, it's gonna,
Well,
it'll take its toll.
do you think the conversation will be Tupac, Biggie, DMX? Do you think it'll get to that level?
No, I don't think so.
Mhm.
I, you know, I mean, DMX is up there, but he's not on my Mount Rushmore. And don't ask me what
Mhm.
my Mount Rushmore is, because I'm not going to think about it right now. But I don't think he would make my Mount Rushmore, but he'd be just below it,
Mhm.
climbing up to the top, uh, like Cary Grant did in the Alfred Hitchcock movie. He's definitely maybe in the top 10, and in order to think about, and important. But you know you have to last a long time, and be able to transcend uh, a generation or two with your music, and still be there to be on top of Mount Rushmore for that.
But it remains to be seen, right? But
Well, it
it's
might. I mean, there's people. He's unfortunately, once you die, your music doesn't, and it gets a gigantic jolt. Um, and there are always, the test for good hip hop for me is, if can I put it on now and it's gonna rock a party still. And his music
right, right, right.
is gonna, there he has songs that are definitely going to do that. I can't say that if I'm at a party, I'm more likely to play a DMX song than I am an LL Cool J song, and expect the floor to be packed and stay packed. And I don't want to start comparing one with the other,
Mm.
all the time like that. But that's what that I just feel like you need to be able to put on somebody's classics, or somebody's songs, and they still bang, and still go, as along with the lyrics and message that may be in them. And that list of folks that still do that for hip hop is not that big. Not that big.
Butch Charles, the dean of Syracuse radio. Although you got to shout out to Ted Long, right? 41 years uh, uh, on the same station, on the same show. So, but you're still the dean in my view.
I don't have to shout out Ted, do I?
No, you don't have to.
Ted knows I love him and Amy, but different mission.
Yeah. Different. So speaking of different mission, lastly, we talked a little bit about DMX. You put that in perspective. What's your thought about Syracuse radio? Our good colleague put a post out and talking about the state of the Syracuse radio scene. What's your take on it? That's your parting shot.
Uh-huh. Um, well, I mean, as usual, uh, Syracuse radio is, like the whole industry today, is all about the dollar, and not about the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to be a fair statement for somebody like Ted and Amy,
Mm-hmm.
who have been at it for a long time and certainly have done their share of uh, being a part of the Syracuse community and willing to help out. I particularly have felt lately, last 4 or 5 years, I have particularly felt the pain of not being on the air to help this community speak out about what's been happening from Breonna Taylor through all of the deaths that have happened at the hands of police and Black Lives Matter, and where we are at a community, and being able to speak out about it and express their feelings, as those things go on. I would love for a station to be able to allow folks to talk about this Chauvin trial and the young man Duante Wright, who was shot by a police officer allegedly by mistake. You want to talk about the pandemic. We're not
Right.
here to tell people why it's important for them to get a vaccine shot and where they need to go, and all the people that we have lost as a result of COVID, and where it's gone. That's where radio is for this community, needs to be, and isn't, because we don't have a voice for that. And the stations that portend to be there for the Black adults and for the kids are playing the music, but they ain't talking to them.
They ain't talking to nobody.
They're not. They're not a sounding board, and they're not a sounding board for people to come and talk to. I mean, they have your show,
right?
And people can listen and get information from it, but where's the music and entertainment? And Steve Harvey ain't talking to us. Steve Harvey is talking to America, and if he's doing it, and hip hop, where hip hop lives is simply hip hop, and it's not, there's no context for why it's being played and where you should go with it, and and that's it. So that's an element that can only be provided by us being in a position to talk to folks, have the station and talk to folks, because as a business, it is still a business. You've got to make money, and in order to survive. And in our particular case, it's a lot cheaper to just play the music and not talk to anybody, not put anybody in there that's going to talk to you, and save on that in order to get it done. I don't want to encourage people not to listen to you, or listen to listen to anybody else, but that's what's missing, in its development. And yes, that costs a little bit more, but it pays back in dividends once you have listeners and you keep them and they're there. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do agree with you. And I think part of it's sort of like this thing: power concedes nothing without a demand; it never has, never will. So we have to, in this moment, though, I think we have to create alternative means of communicating. When we were first starting out in the business, there was only one way to talk to folk, and so now, and I think it was you who was saying this. It's you're right. We should be able to pop on the radio and hear our concerns and issues addressed. and on a more other than one time during a particular week. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us who have a platform or those who have skills and expertise to find ways to talk to the community without regard to the other systems. Unless we have our own, uh, we got to continue to use by any means necessary to get the message and words out to the people, because we don't have to wait for somebody to say, you can turn on this dial. Now, in my case, I'm paying my way to get this message out, but with the support of my sponsors and community. But to your point, um, what is lacking across the board is the very thing that you say, that we care about the community, but we don't have real evidence to support that. So we've got to demand that, and we've got to use our voices in new and different ways to make sure that the community is informed. I'm going to do what I got. I'm going to do as much as I can with the time that I have and the platforms that I have, because it's not just the broadcast. It's part of it, but it's also all the different ways that we can get things to our people.
But, but remember this too, George, it's not, while we're not doing enough ourselves here to take care of ourselves in terms of doing it. That's true. But the government isn't helping either. The Federal Communications Commission,
correct,
and the Republican administrations that we've had to deal with have been all about deregulation and making it easier for these large companies like iHeart, like Cumulus, to be able to make money because they own so many stations and need to drop their overhead in order to do it. So, so somebody can own a radio station here in Syracuse, talk to the community, and they could be in Rochester, or they could be in Cincinnati, or they could be in
Tampa, Florida, or anywhere.
They don't have to be here. They don't have to physically be here in order to do that. Whereas before then, the FCC said, if you're going to run a station here, you've got to be within 10, 15, 25 miles of what you're doing. So there's no feeling or anything involved with being a part of it, because there's nobody there to do it. So, and that's to help the business from sliding and having to hire those people to do it. But you also lose out on any real connection with your community to do it. And it's communities like ours that suffer. It's not going to happen in New York. It's not going to happen. New York they know that they have to be in touch with everybody in order to do it. They may be trying to do it with fewer people, but it's not going to happen in New York. It's not going to happen in Baltimore. It's not going to happen in larger city centers. But, Syracuse is number 100 now. Used to be in the 70s, 60s.
Yeah, it used to be in the 70s and 80s. Yeah.
It's in, we're number 100 in size. And, once we slip into 101, you're in another level. We're already at like the third level. So once we get under 100, or I should say over 100, you're not considered as important, and therefore you're lumped in with everybody else who has to get their programming done through corporate. So but it's incumbent on us to make the moves that we need to try to bring that together. And there are still folks trying to do that effort, but we have to be able to make moves that are going to help us sustain, and not something that's going to not last. And
true that.
That said, and I know you want to go, that said, let us not forget that power in some form or another has been on the air here in Syracuse now for the last 20 years.
Amen. Right.
Okay.
Largely due to efforts like yours.
Well, we started it, yes, and we at least made it strong enough for them to want to maintain it after they cleared us out. But it's been on for 20 years. So, you know, we should be happy and applaud at least that we have that and support it so it stays going. And sooner or later, something else will come along that people will be able to enjoy.
That's Butch Charles. I said goodbye once. I'm going to say goodbye again. The dean of Syracuse Radio. 20 years for power, but also a decade, a lifetime for him here in Syracuse and Central New York. They ought to do a documentary on you. I think that's the next project. I'm just putting it out there. We need a documentary on Butch Charles.
Hey, people do need a good night's sleep. So
all right. Inspiration for the nation.